And for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. This meeting is being live streamed by Chelmsford Telemedia and posted to the Chelmsford Public Schools website for interested community members to access and watch. In-person public participation will be taking place tonight in accordance with the Chelmsford School Committee Public Participation Guidelines. Anyone speaking tonight during the public input portion of the meeting has notified the superintendent's office of their desire to speak and has been provided with these guidelines. Upon request, written comments received no later than 12 p.m. on the day of this meeting will also be read and made a part of the record of the meeting during the second public input session. I don't see any members of the press here tonight, so welcome to the Chelmsford School Committee meeting. We are going to defer our approval of the minutes until our next meeting, and that brings us right to good news.
That was very fast. So a couple of pieces of good news. This past weekend, we celebrated the class of 2022 at graduation. It was a wonderful event. We were all there. So congratulations again to those students. They're going to have so much fun. I'm always so jealous of them at graduation because I'm thinking, oh, such a good time in your life. Enjoy it. But they did a great job, and it went off without a hitch. And another piece of good news is one of our biology teachers, Dr. Linda Tonini, has been named as the 2022 recipient of the Massachusetts Outstanding Biology Teacher Award by the National Association of Biology Teachers. I think I just said biology like 4 times. So congratulations to Dr. Tonini at Chelmsford High School. And that's it for good news on my end.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any good news?
I did want to say something. So for anybody that attended the graduation, I would like to congratulate Maria on the graduation of her 2 daughters, who she got to see on stage, which I thought was a really great thing. And anybody that knows Maria for a while knows how involved and how important school is for her and her family. So she could not be here, so I did want to at least say that for her. So.
Thank you. All right, moving on to new business.
Thank you. We're going to jump right in. We're going to invite Principal Kurt McPhee of the McCarthy Middle School and Carrie Calabrese, who is our assistant principal, to talk a little bit about McCarthy Middle School, to share some updates and what occurred over the course of this past year. So I welcome Kurt and Carrie.
Hi, good
Thanks for
evening,
being here.
everybody.
Just speak right into the mic, and happy to have you.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. It's great to be here, and it's wonderful, you know, after these past 2+ years, it's good to be back here in person presenting in front of you. Certainly, you know, our major goal was bringing everybody back in the building this year and trying to have as much normalcy as possible, if that was possible. But, you know, as we're going to show you a couple of slides, you know, we tried to schedule some events, speakers, other activities at the school that, you know, we're able to bring large groups of people back together again. And it was great to be able to do that. You know, we felt like we did it safely. And it was great. You know, our goal was just to like really re-engage, reconnect with kids, have kids connect with their peers socially, you know, and for students and staff to continue to foster and maintain meaningful relationships, because one piece of research that has really stuck with me in my time as administrator is the more kids feel connected, the more likely kids are going to be successful in school. So a lot of thought and planning went into these events. You know, some of the events were sponsored by Student Council, others were generated out of our PBIS committee, which Carrie did a lot of work with that committee this year and in the past few years. We also were able to bring back in-person after-school activities. You know, it's one of the things kids get really excited about summer school. I think we did a good job of still holding these activities last year when they were basically remote. But it was really, you know, incredible to bring them back in person. And we had clubs that were wildly successful again. Dungeons and Dragons, packed every week. 3D printing, packed every week. fall cross-country, and spring track. We brought spring track back this year. We didn't have it the past few years. There was a culminating meet of Parker and McCarthy kids. It was on the day of the district retirement party. And my plan was to zip out into the back park, at least be able to spend a few minutes before I went off to the celebration. There wasn't a spot to be had. The entire back parking lot, including grass, they were parked across the street. They had a
Into the
food truck, an
hundreds.
ice cream truck there, and it was just unbelievable the turnout they got. So, there was no official score, which school won. It was just all individual events. So we were able to really.
Gateway.
Well, no. But, Adam Falzani is that person, him along with Caitlin Click, that did a lot of the work behind the scenes to get that program back up and running. Other things, that was great to have back in person, being able to do a musical again, because last year they did a virtual program. It was interesting, but not the same thing as an in-person event. And, going back to 2020, when we shut down, that was production week. So that was quite a blow for that, for our drama kids, to put in months of preparation only to have the show never happen. So it was a good feeling to be able to get that back up and running. The kids did a great job. Other activities, PTO jumped in. They sponsored some events. So we've had 2 outdoor 5th and 6th grade socials. So I actually really like the outdoor socials because, before we'd pack, upwards of 300 kids in the CAF and the gym. Outside, we had the DJ outside. Kids had a blast at both of those events. They put on our 7th grade blacklight dance, so all neon colors. I think some of those pictures were shared out in one of your newsletters. Again, a very well-attended 7th grade event. And the other event that they began this year is they had a student bingo right after school. Mr. Falzani was the bingo caller. But just, they looked at trying to schedule events that they could just, have kids together and having a good time. The biggest challenge is in what this year is just bringing the kids back to being in-person students again. And, we continue to struggle with that. The kids have really struggled not having been in school full-time for these past, year and a half before this year. So we really concentrated at, not reinventing, but just kind of retraining kids with what our behavioral expectations are. Carrie in the PBIS group has done a great job. I know she'll probably be able to touch base and talk a little bit more about this, but really, we created a matrix. What does perseverance look like in a classroom? What does that look like, in the halls, all different types of things. So morning announcements, we would reinforce those. Carrie does our morning announcements, and, every day is kind of reinforcing what those expectations are. And we continue to do it throughout the year, and we're still doing it, in the second, so the last full week of school. So that has continued on. The other new piece that the district invested in and our staff kind of has jumped right in is we are teaching second step lessons on a weekly basis. And we accomplished this, and we have, right now this year, second step is on Mondays. Might not be Monday next year, but what we do is the entire school is doing second step at the same time. And so how it works is I paired up teachers. So you have the classroom teacher along with another specialist in the building. They're teaching those lessons together. I wanted, all staff to see, know what the lesson was in a particular week so they could bring it back to their own classroom. So the partnerships have worked in most cases, and sometimes they have, the students have the class in the specialist classroom, so it's not always in the same location as always. So that has, that was new. Some of our older kids are like, why are we doing this? But I think the younger kids are used to it from the elementary school. But I think with each year, there's just going to become a lot more, comfortability with it, and people will feel more confident, second time going through this curriculum next year. So that's been a large piece. Then that program focuses on the five five widely accepted social emotional competencies, focusing on self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And units cover having a growth mindset, setting goals. Units cover recognizing bullying and harassment. There are units that cover just thoughts, emotions, how to regulate them, and decision-making. And, even down to like the skills of compromise. When people see things differently, how do you come to an accepted middle ground? So, that's been a new piece. Like I said, the whole building is doing it. And how we chipped time away from almost every class on Mondays. So it wasn't like certain subject areas took the hit for this program. We feel like it's important enough. We're all taking a little bit of a hit on time on Mondays to teach the second step curriculum. So that's been a real big focus. You will start to hear a little bit more of our actual activities. Carrie's going to move into the next slide.
All right, thank you. So as Kurt explained, our big focus was reconnecting staff and students. And alongside of that, this year, the district started its diversity, equity, and inclusiveness training with administration and with staff members. So it was over the summer when we administrators were starting to take a deeper dive into our DEI work that it caused a moment of reflection for the two of us to think, okay, we had this goal of reconnecting kids because of the pandemic, but it made us professionally reflect back to pre-pandemic days. And were our kids really connected? Were there populations of kids that we felt may have been less connected and we just didn't recognize that pre-pandemic? So our DEI work really, caused us to narrow that lens, and we did find populations of students that we felt might have been experiencing a bit of disconnect that had nothing to do with the pandemic whatsoever. And that's what brings us into a diversity and school-wide inclusivity discussion. Because of this work that the district has offered us, we decided that it wasn't just enough to reconnect. We needed to make sure that all of our smaller populations, not just individuals that, tended to be outliers or non-participants. So we identified a few student populations, certainly our student Indian population and their families, our LGBTQ population were the two that really came to mind, and that was a focus for us. This year. So we wanted to be able to acknowledge that these groups exist under our school roof and that they are just as important as all the other groups, as athletics, as performing arts, and the other groups of students that we have. So we wanted to make sure that we were not just planning fun activities and of that nature, but also planning and facilitating activities or education that would help our larger student population and even our staff become more aware. And we're going to talk about a couple of different ways on how we did that. We wanted to build our cultural acknowledgments into part of our daily routine. We thought one of the best ways to do that was to model that for staff and students through morning announcements. We did take some time this year and talk to students and staff, specifically of Indian heritage, and wanted to know what are some of the important holidays? How can we help celebrate? How can we acknowledge? So the three major holidays that we did acknowledge, it was Diwali in the fall, which is the Festival of Lights, and Holi in the springtime. We actually had a spirit day that went along with that. Holi is the festival of spring, and it's the marking of all the colors coming out in nature. So it's very, very large in the Indian population. So we encourage students to wear, all different colors and rainbow colors, and it was wonderful. We had a lot of students participate. And then we had students come forward and say, wait, there's still more. And so the last holiday that we made a point to acknowledge and educate students on was Vaisakhi, which is almost very similar. It's a festival of like harvesting, and it's also about like spring-ish, new life coming and things like that. So it was wonderful also to get that student input. And it really worked out because we had students teaching us and the conversations were wonderful, and it does narrow the gap a little bit. So that was just a stepping stone for us. We plan to continue that and extend, those acknowledgements to other cultural backgrounds in our student population. We also wanted to make sure that we really sunk our teeth into Black History Month, and of course, June is Pride Month. So there was a lot of work behind the scenes that went along with that, with different subcommittees and different individuals on staff. We surveyed our staff to see what they had on the books in their curriculum for Black History Month. Did they have anything special that they were going to do because it was Black History Month and tie into their core curriculum? And were you willing to share it out in case somebody needed an idea? So it was great to gather that information, and because we had that information, we were able to hit the ground running with that. We ended up creating for both months a teacher resource guide for the entire staff, which they really didn't have to think about. So the people behind the scenes went online and did searches for different short videos that were 6 minutes or under, that were appropriate for each of our 4 grade levels, because not everything out there, what you can show an 8th grader is not the same thing that you can show a 5th grader. We also added some Kahoots. For those who don't know what a Kahoot is, it's an online quiz template where you can insert any content area and students can answer and they can see, who got it right. It's almost like a mini game show. So we released, different Kahoots for Black History Month every week for teachers to use. We released different videos every week, if they were interested in using them, and all, with ratings for what grade and whatnot. We did the same thing for Pride Month this month too. We created a resource guide for teachers, ratings for different grade levels on what was appropriate, because we have to be sensitive of what certain grade levels know at their age and what their experience has been. So that has proven to be very helpful. We've received a lot of positive feedback. We also wanted to make sure that our students understood not only what their role is as a student, as Kurt had said earlier, but what their responsibilities are in a larger society, specifically one that's diverse like our student population. So we did that through a number of events. Some of these events were student-led. So grateful for the facilitators of our student council team and our Project 300 team. The students, learned what it meant to give back. We had food drives and clothing drives. We did Cradles to Crayons. We did Project 300. We did Penny Wars and donated to local cancer society. And there was excitement in that. And some of it was made competitive just to give it a little bit more zing. But we found we really didn't need the zing because students became interested the more they were educated about what's going on in the larger world. And then also for our LGBTQ student population, we did some great work in our Stand Up McCarthy, which is our GSA after-school club. Our facilitator, Dr. Nicole Hanlon, is wonderful and has guided that group of students so well this year. They created rainbow ribbons, and they were making them so that people could wear them and also support Pride Month. And then all of the inclusive work that we've done, and specifically we had one of our fellow administrators come over who's knowledgeable in gender identity and did a professional development for McCarthy staff only. And we did that early on in the year just to widen everybody's lens on how different students are and that it's okay. So we were very excited with what we were able to accomplish this year.
I want to just, in the last slide that we will share out is just a lot of the events that we had. So we started in the fall. We had staff versus student, like extreme volleyball. It's like an oversized volleyball. So each grade level had a chance for the kids to play against staff members. It was a lot of fun. And, some of the other things, we did some like student based like tournaments. We had a floor hockey tournament, the first ever, complete with the golden skate. You got the homeroom got the golden skate. So Kristen Lyons made up 4 awards. So hopefully we'll be able to use those year to year. We did a team handball event. In December, we did a holiday door decorating contest, and again, one of the themes was inclusiveness and diversity, all the different holiday celebrations. Students' homerooms that won the prize in that got a movie to watch in the brand-new auditorium, so a lot of them are cashing those tickets in this week. And that auditorium is beautiful, so it's been great having that back.
And it has the best AC unit in the district. So.
Well, there isn't one. No.
It's because it's dark.
No, in the mornings, there were some cool mornings, so it was pulling in a lot of cool air.
I'm gonna go with it though.
Yeah, well, if you remember, McCarthy Idol, another event in there, that was a hot one, that was a hot night, but it was great just to be able to bring that event back to life. We haven't had that in a couple of years, so Mr. Sullivan and his committee do a nice job putting that on. So it's really been a year. We've tried to bring some of these events back, and we were able to have a lot of grade level wide events. Back in the auditorium, we're able to have 2 assembly programs come in. One was Dr. the Machine, Jesse Green, cheeseburgers, chainsaws, and rock and roll. And so it's a fast-paced visual slideshow. He shows 1,100 slides in about 50 minutes. And the whole theme is just on perseverance, setting your goals, working towards them, working through setbacks. Very engaging. Kids loved it. The other one that we had more recently is Rob Surratt came back. I believe he's been in the district in the past. He did some, portraits. His focus was on just being able to make a positive difference in the world. So he is going to provide McCarthy with
6 foot.
a 6-foot picture of Gandhi. So he's doing that. He didn't want to just give us the ones that he was done, would do in 15 minutes. We'll get a much nicer version of it. So it's been a busy year. It's been great. At McCarthy Idol, we also returned, and the staff did a wonderful act. So just want to put it out there, so you might want to watch that video that Dr. Lang sent out on in the last newsletter. And then the last slide is literally just pictures of some of the different events. So including, the door decorating contest, some of the artwork from Holly, and some of the events in the gym, as well as the assembly. So it's been a busy year. It's, we're almost, at the finish line. We're getting there. There's a lot of events coming up next week as far as the 8th graders go, so they're off. To Canopy, we have their awards ceremony, and they have their dance next week. The other event that it was on the slideshow, and I didn't mention, was our Project 300 food drive this year. We collected over 30,000 food items. So the Salvation Army did recognize McCarthy Middle School in their annual dinner program. So it was, Mary Jane McCardle shared that with me. So it's been a wonderful year. Sorry I had no puppy for you guys, but
Thank you.
no problem.
The pictures of the school look very bright. Everything looks new in those photos.
Yeah.
I haven't been there in a while.
You can,
on over.
you're welcome whenever.
It looks sparkling.
No, the custodial crew has done a great job, and the cleaning crew, keeping the building shiny and sparkly as best they can.
I don't know if people have questions. I thank you very much for coming and just sharing. I know we are in the home stretch of the school year, but there's been a lot of work that's been done to just kind of get back to that more normalcy that I think we were all seeking. So I appreciate you coming and sharing that tonight.
And just give a quick shout out to our middle schoolers who are in the Knowledge Bowl tomorrow night.
Nice.
Oh, that's right.
Hopefully we make it to the finals on Thursday night, so.
Tell those D&D kids if they want another player, I'm still in.
All right.
I offered last year, I've been waiting all year.
Nobody took you up?
Excuse me, Mr. McPhee, I didn't know if anybody had any questions. All right, great, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you, guys.
School night, they have to get home.
All right, next up.
Yep, I'm just going to need 1 minute to just switch with Bill. Bill is going to join the screen. So we have Bill Silver, Director of Technology, here tonight to just talk a little bit about kind of a year in review, some of the projects that took place over the course of this year, and some of the work that's scheduled ahead for the following school year. So I welcome Bill, and Bill put together a little report and then also some slides that he's going to share with us tonight.
Okay. All right, thank you all. It's good to be back. I've made a commitment to trying to keep this under 10 minutes, so we'll see how we do. It's a quick agenda. I'm going to just give you a couple of review topics from the previous school year. I'll talk about some of the projects that were completed or that are still in process and are upcoming. I'll give you a quick synopsis of our integration, staff happenings, and things that happened throughout the technology classes and business classes. And then I just do have one staff repurposing request for you at the end. First, I just want to quickly say how much I really appreciate the staff that I have. They work so hard each and every day. And the thing that really separates these folks from me is they're so driven to provide excellent customer service, which is really the key in technology. Something is always going to happen with technology, but as long as you're compassionate with your customers, they typically will give you the benefit of the doubt and give you the time you need to fix things. And that's what these folks do in and day out. So I want them to all know I'm very grateful to have them working with me. I'd like to take you through a couple of grant awards that came out for us this year. It was actually a pretty successful grant year. Dr. Sweeney got us grants from PLTW, Lockheed Martin, and DESE called through the DLCS grant. She brought in, over $50,000 with those grants. They were fantastic. They went towards PD for our PLTW and computer science teachers. We were also able to do some curriculum revision, which needs to be done frequently, especially in technology. So thank you, Dr. Sweeney, for securing those for us. We received the Accelerating Mathematics grant from the state. That paid for $80,000 worth of our iReady subscription. We were approved again this year for Category 1 E-rate funding, and that will pay for about 40% of all of our internet and firewall services, which typically comes out to somewhere around $40,000. We received DCF funding for just over $815,000, and that went to purchase over 2,000 Chromebook devices, and we also received 70 wireless hotspots with unlimited internet access for anyone who might need to borrow those for home use. We had a cybersecurity grant. This was actually a non-monetary grant, but really important nonetheless. Cybersecurity is obviously a big topic these days, and folks can and often do fall victim to phishing schemes and things like this. So this came with professional development, which was very well done. There were like kind of quick hits that staff could walk through at their own pace. We had fairly good participation. It was open to the entire staff, and I would say better than 60% participated. And we also got to simulate phishing campaigns. And so that's kind of like a monetary grant, because the software to do that type of thing is fairly pricey. But we got to do that with the state. We'd get a little alert the day before what was coming through, and then we kind of see who, sort of clicked through some of these things, et cetera, et cetera. I will say we started off not perfect, but staff really did get better as they went on. And I got many comments back from people who said, I've really learned a lot through the professional development, and even, in protecting my own home email address and things like that. So while we sort of took it from the vantage point of protecting the school network and things like that, it was good to hear that it was helpful for people in their own lives.
Those phishing campaigns are getting better and better.
They are. Some of them are fabulous.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one way to make a living, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
We don't encourage it.
No, we do not. Okay, let me take you through some of the project updates. So this summer, we will be performing an update to the virtual environment. We actually did lose our main backup device this year, but we back up to the cloud as well, and we have a alternate device we're backing up to now. So that'll all be redone. It's a nice new Dell setup. Sorry, Mr. Moses.
You're fine.
We'll also be upgrading our internet bandwidth to 15 gigs. We have two diverse providers, so they come to us from, opposite sides of North Road. So in case we lose a pole someplace, we won't be fully down. That will also include a firewall and a filter upgrade that will push that bandwidth, and we won't bottleneck any place. Obviously, the Chromebooks I talked about coming in for the grant, there's about 2,000 of them. So many of those are going to be used for our one-to-one initiative, but the remainder of those will go to upgrading carts at the elementary. So we have 2 grade levels that did have brand-new devices installed, which was grade 4 and kindergarten. So we'll be focusing in on grades 1, 2, and 3 and outfit as many carts as possible with the new devices. We did perform the final leg of the security upgrades. The elementary schools were all brought up to the specs of the high school and the 2 middle schools. They got number of cameras, more door access, swipe controls. And we also were able to put in a visitor management system at the new CHS vestibule. And this allows visitors to come in, put their own license in. You may have seen it if you've been there. And it checks against some law enforcement databases, and if everything checks out, a badge automatically prints out and it's handed to the visitor. The library, that got all new furniture this year, and we put up some digital signage as well. So current events can be played for the students up there. The furniture was very well received. It's beautiful. If you haven't had a chance to go through it, it looks much more like a college library now. There's great spaces for getting work done. There's also great spaces to sort of hang out and enjoy the library. There'll be a couple more upgrades to that this summer. We're going to redo the circulation desk, both circulation desks. There'll also be a little more furniture added to the alumni area where we didn't cover. And then some of the real tall bookshelves that sort of break the sight lines in that place, we're going to have much lower shelving. It'll be about 3 feet tall. And it's going to ring the perimeter of the library and sort of open the whole place up. In addition, we'll be setting up an esports team for the fall. And so we'll have a few competition rooms set up in there as well.
Did you get that, Mr. Moses?
I missed the last thing. What happened?
Esports.
Oh, yes, I am excited about that. Sorry, I was checked out there for a second.
We will not leave you hanging. We'll communicate with you and get you out to experience that.
I mean, the kids will probably be upset because I just beat them all the time. Go on.
In the classrooms this summer, we're going to be adding sound bars to all the ClearTouch TVs, so folks can sort of have an enhanced sound level for any of their presentations. We'll also continue putting out the larger monitors and dock stations so teachers can connect their Chromebooks and have sort of more real estate to work on and just have an overall better experience with that. We did a PaperCut upgrade. PaperCut's a software that allows you to release your print jobs via badge. You can print from any device to any device and walk up to any device in the district and release them. So now all the copiers, all of our laser printers are contained in PaperCut. We did upgrade the school clocks as well. So there's a wireless clock system. They all talk to each other and sort of keep the time. Those work well for the most part, especially once daylight savings time is over. If we could just stick with one time, they'd work perfectly forever. And one other project we were able to complete is our email archiver. We finally ran out of space on our on-prem archiver, so we moved to a cloud-based version. Now we have unlimited storage. We don't have to sort of get rid of any mail. We can just continue to keep it indefinitely. That also came with a security platform, which was a further protection for email. So now mail actually traverses 2 security systems. One's the Barracuda system, and then it also goes through Office 365. We've noticed a sharp decline in the amount of junk that gets through, which is good. But like with anything, sometimes it's a little overzealous and does block some things that we need to release. Okay. This is updates really from Dr. Sweeney with all the groups that she works with. And please know, this is, 6 highlights, but there are pages of the things that our TISs and our tech instructors, librarians, teachers have all worked on this year. But we'd be here for hours going through them all. So I just picked out a few of the highlights for you. Once again, this year our TISs did a great job with professional development. This is, really where they've shined for us over the years. They really help teachers build their skill sets and keep their skill sets at a consistent level. They're constantly training our curriculum tools and software, different hardware items, from ClearTouches to the Chromebooks to document cameras. And what's nice about what they do is they have time to do one-to-one training. They also can do small group instruction at grade level meetings and things like that. And they do offer to go in and co-teach. So a teacher who might be a little hesitant to run something large as a technology lesson, fearing that maybe everything won't go exactly as planned, can have one of the TISs in the room. And that takes a real load off and gives people a lot of encouragement to continue to engage students through the use of technology. Project Lead the Way. We had our Project Lead the Way teachers and TISs attended the Fall Summit, and then they did Spring PD at Worcester Polytech. This was the first year of the Business Innovations Pathway in the business department. They did career counseling, had several speakers, and hosted several events, so that was very successful. And then at the high school, the Lions Locker school store actually moved upstairs closer to where the production area is. So that probably makes it a lot easier for Mr. Shoup. And we also had a nice entrepreneurship course. They linked up with a group called Spark Alpha, and then they did like a Shark Tank pitch at the PAC, which was really fun, and it was, I think, really good for the students.
I attended that. They did a really nice job.
They did. All right, I'll give you, who can read this? I don't know. Some quick facts about things that were sort of accomplished with Google this year. Over 580,000 new Google Docs were added to the environment, 27,000 new spreadsheets, 5,500 new forms, 208,000 new Google slide presentations, 1,600 drawings, and over 5,000 Google Classrooms were created this year. All told, we closed about 9,200 tickets this year. The average response time was less than a day, and the average time to close was 2.3 days. I probably followed up a little bit of that average because I still have tickets sitting in my queue for months, waiting for parts and things like that, so sorry, guys. Okay, and then the last piece I have for you is the repurposing request. As we sort of discussed last year, we were expecting a retirement of our student database manager. This is a very important position, does all of the state, federal reporting, et cetera, et cetera. And we did make a name change to sort of the assistant role last year. I'd like to just change the title of the current job. I have also updated the job description and the responsibilities for this particular role. I'd like to call it the ICTS Data Analyst. And then I'd also request that we enhance the salary slightly so it's more in line with other districts and we can sort of, go after a talented person for this role. And then the graphic is just sort of how the department is laid out. And the only change this year is really the title to ICTS Data Analyst over the Assistant Data Analyst.
Excellent.
10 minutes.
Nailed it.
This particular thing, whether we would take up at another meeting next meeting? This particular thing right here, that,
He's just showing what the org chart in the department is.
okay. I didn't know if we needed to make any changes this year.
To the org chart?
Yeah.
No, just the title change.
Okay,
Yeah, no one will report differently to anyone. The only change is that far right gray block just basically becomes renamed. It would have said Student Database Manager.
So I don't, no, I appreciate you, Bill, just kind of giving the update for the year to kind of show what was done. There was a significant amount, obviously, from the tech group, and it is a smaller group that's servicing the whole district. I think they do a very good job. And certainly the summer's going to be busy, like any summer that we have in technology, trying to, buildings and grounds and technology, try to get a lot of work done while the people aren't here. And really, for the number of devices that are managed, and even with the one-on-one technology, it's a big lift for the group. So I appreciate you and your department's work.
Thank you.
Behind the presentation, Bill had also just provided a deeper narrative, just so you have some backup. And then at the very end of that was that updated job description with the title change. So I don't know if anyone has any questions for Bill. I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them. And then go from there.
I just want to say, great work, as always. I mean, we all see the work and the results, because if you don't do your job, all the kids don't get all the things they need, and we hear about it, and I think that's great. And also, my daughter wanted to relay to you, she got a new computer, and it didn't have her stickers on it. Just letting you know, that the stickers didn't come with the computer. We're fine, though. Just giving you the feedback as it
Sorry
comes to
about
me.
that. We do sometimes have to remove them during the repair process, and they don't always make it back.
It's fair, it's fair. But thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So now this next year, everybody will have the one-on-one from 5 to
Yeah,
12?
yeah, we'll be 5 to 12, fully 1-to-1, and, we're essentially 1-to-1 K to 12. Every single homeroom at the elementary school has a cart, and those kids have full access when the teachers would like to have access.
And congratulations on all those grants too, by the way.
Thank you.
Year
Yeah.
after year, it's,
That was great for the district.
yep. Just a question on the new position. In terms of the increased salary, is it a significant amount? If it is, how we cover that in the budget? I don't know if Joanna or Jay or...
Yeah, I want to say I don't have the exact salary of the current person. And again, this is more of a range, but it's within about $10,000 of the current salary. But we would just reallocate because we've already approved the budget, we would just reallocate within the department budget to compensate for that. And I don't know ultimately what the salary would be for the person who gets the job, because they still have to go through the process.
Right.
I think the concern is, Bill was mentioning, there were like 3 districts in our area that went out for this position over the course of this past year, at all significantly higher salaries than we had. And even within our job description, he's gone through and kind of updated it to be more current. And I think, unfortunately, that stuff happens quite often when someone leaves a job, because when you have a person in the job and they've been with you for a long time, you don't go in and constantly update a job description. But it's like when that individual leaves is kind of the opportunity to go and do that. So he's done that to make sure it's current, that the degree requirements are current and things along those lines. So I think it's definitely within the realm of what is out there and what's been being hired in our region.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't a big increase and we'd have a hard time covering.
No, it's not something that we're not going to be able to cover within within department budget itself. We just don't know ultimately what it'll end up being.
The other consideration too is there is a range on the assistant data analyst position, so depending on who applies for that, they could be closer to one end of the range than the other, so.
It's in our packet, job description and the salary range. Yeah, okay.
With the new range, I just wanted to know how that
Yes.
compared to the old range.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Jeff, did you have anything?
I'm just amazed that, I go back to the days of mimeograph machines and typing.
Chalkboards.
Oh, it's just, the chalkboards and all, it's just incredible. I mean, and when I look at the turnaround time, back when I was a dean, it would be a week if you heard from someone. It was, you want to go on the internet and put it into help desk when your internet was down. And so this is so great for the teachers and for the kids that your staff and you turn everything around so quickly, because we're so dependent upon it now that's really, really important. And anything sitting in your queue because of supply problems, that's not your issue, Bill, so you don't have to apologize for that.
Thanks, Jeff.
Absolutely, I can, certainly agree with everything that's already been said. And the fact that I can imagine that in without COVID, this would have been, maybe a more gradual rolling out of some things, but COVID certainly expedited, everything, so that, teachers, students, had to, become very familiar with technology rapidly, and to have the support of your department and to keep things moving forward has been a huge undertaking, has not gone unnoticed, and greatly appreciated by all of us.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I do have a question, and this is not necessarily for you to answer tonight, but in light of some of the events that have happened around the country, I think school safety is something that is, obviously very important, and that all districts are taking a look at. We've already done a lot of work around that with our doors, our cameras, but if there's anything else that you can think of that as a district that we could do, I'm not sure, what is available out there. I know there's a lot of different things that, may not necessarily, be the best choice in product, whether it be a notification system or whatever it might be. But if there's something that you can think of that you think that we should take a look at, any advice would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, we will always certainly keep our eyes open for enhancements in that realm. Sometimes we're fortunate, the manufacturers will enhance their product that we already own. So, for instance, Jason, our cybersecurity person today, was working on alerts when doors are sort of held open. It will send an email to the principals and just alert them to that. So that's a feature that got added to that system, and now we're gonna, try to roll that out. Every little step you can take defensively is always good.
Great, thank you.
I'm impressed with the entrance to the high school. 'Cause all those years, people would just kind of walk in and buzz in, and just putting the license in now makes it so much easier to check things. And if you're a visitor coming in, the person at the door is told. Like when I've gone in to speak to a couple of classes, they knew I was coming in, which I think is a huge thing too.
It is, yep.
All right, does anybody have any other questions? Well, thank you very much for coming in
Do you have to
tonight.
vote on the new position title?
Yeah, ideally, you would vote to approve the job description that's provided.
Oh, that'd be me. I move that the committee approves the new title and job description as presented.
Second.
All right, and then is this just this is not a roll call vote? Because of the salary increase, do we have to do a roll?
I would do it as roll call vote because it is technically, you can consider it a new position.
Okay, terrific. All right, thank you. All right, so is there any other further discussion? Okay, then I'll take a vote. Jeff?
Yes.
Guys?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill.
Don't go anywhere until I get this next presentation going. So we're going to switch into our next item on the agenda this evening is, I'll just hang out for a second, see if it works.
Yeah, those difficulties that you referenced? Well,
We're going to see.
and we are the poster child.
All the tickets are
I
actually
might have to
Jay's.
put in a ticket right now. So we're going to join remotely with the district management group folks, Alex and Tess, before I log in. So this is a group that we actually contracted with and who has been working with us since right before the holidays on our new strategic plan for the Chelmsford Public Schools. So tonight, we're going to actually have an update, and then for the viewing audience, I know we've been kind of putting this out in the weekly newsletters. This will give an update as to kind of where we're at, some of the needs assessment work that was done, some of the initial findings, and then some of the priority areas that we've identified for work over next year and the years to come. And then we're going to be shifting into kind of the initiative phase to figure out over the course of the summertime what some of the initiatives that could align to these areas are. So I'm going to join with Alex and Tess, and then they're going to give an overview of where they're at with the process. And tomorrow, we actually have 3 different sessions, which will be reviewing similar data that we have tonight. There's 2 remote sessions during the day, and then an evening session for anyone that would like to talk in person tomorrow night at the McCarthy Library. Again, to just receive the same information and give any input that they would like as we kind of pull this together. So let me join Alex and Tess, and we will go through this presentation.
build proactively what moving on.
Hey, I think I'm doing it here. Alex and Tess? Hi, how are you?
Good, can you hear us?
We can hear you just fine, and you're up in the school committee room. You can only see me, but actually you're on that board that's being projected out to our school committee members and our viewing audience at home who is watching. And I've just prefaced the group by letting them know that we're going to do an update for them tonight. What I'm going to do, just so that there's no distraction, I'm going to mute my mic and basically turn it over to you guys. And then on your end, you can control the slideshows, and then I'll jump in at the end. Or if there are any questions that come up, I'll come back on screen. But I'm going to just shut my screen off to not be a distraction during the presentation. All right? Thank you very much.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight, to both school committee members in addition to anyone else watching. We're very excited to provide an update. I know the last time we've spoken to many of you school committee members since January, but that was the last time we joined this forum to kick off the work. So a lot has been done since then. Not everything finalized yet, but we like to come back and share updates and gather feedback before we do finalize. So that is what we'll be doing this evening. So I'm going to pull up my screen. Great. All right. So 3 objectives for this evening. One, we're just going to reground in our strategic planning process and the process that we've taken over the past several months. And then we'll review the key components of the strategic plan and how we got there by sharing some of the needs assessments. And overall, just want to update you all on the work accomplished and next steps. So how we'll do this, the agenda, we'll review the strategic planning process. As I said, we'll review that needs assessment we conducted, and we'll remind you how we did that. And then we will review the key components of the strategic plan and talk about next steps. So we always like to start just talking about the rationale for a strong strategic plan, especially in Chelmsford. And really at the base of this is we know districts manage so many competing priorities, and it can be very difficult to make decisions without those strong priorities. We always say being strategic is saying yes to really good things and no to really other good things. And so that really is the purpose of the strategic plan, to support and inform decision making by having this short list of priorities. It's also really a great way to engage a variety of stakeholders. So we'll talk about the over 100 folks we spoke with and over 700 responses we got to surveys and strategic plan, and then of course the key components that we'll go through to guide this work. So the process that we took first, before we did anything, we gathered a lot of feedback in a variety of ways. DM group collected and analyzed that data, and then we worked to design the plan. And this is the part that a steering committee was developed. I'll share who was part of that in a moment, but we're really still just refining and in this phase. But as I said, before we finalize anything, we'll be gathering community input, which we have 3 meetings tomorrow, 2 virtual and 1 in person, where anyone will have a chance to provide that input as well as the steering committee. So we'll go to step 5 after that and refine the plan based on that feedback by the end of June, so that we can go ahead and finalize that plan. So really the 2 key pieces of community engagement were, 1, through the this first step of gathering feedback and this two-step process that we talk about so that before anything is completely finalized, folks have that opportunity to share again. And that will lead to what eventually will be the very pretty strategic plan. Right now, we're really focused on refining the content. And the folks that have been critical to this work, and if any, I know obviously Maria and Jeff and Jay are all on this call, and I'm sure many others are, but these are the folks that really have, been meeting at least once a month, engaging, and not only sharing their own opinions, but really being those leaders and champions for their schools, for those in their role. Many are also parents. And so it was very important to get a broad perspective from this group and just very much appreciate the leaders that they have been in this work. And so we have been working with this group very closely, but as I said, we conducted our needs assessment to ensure that instead of just the 12 people on that list, but much more broadly, we got input. We conducted a needs assessment, and there are two large buckets of data we collect. One is qualitative evidence, and the other is quantitative, that data analysis. So on the left there, you can see the outline of qualitative data we collected. So this was interviews and focus groups with all the bullets there, from superintendent to school committee members to school leaders, school staff, parents, students. We spoke to mental health professionals in the district. So just really all different perspectives to gather their thoughts. We also did a family engagement survey so that we could collect, we couldn't speak to everyone, but we spoke to over 100 folks and then got close to 700 responses on that family engagement survey. And then, as I said, we did some community engagement meetings, both in person and virtual, and we'll be doing 3 more tomorrow. So that really was encompassing of our qualitative analysis. And then the quantitative analysis we analyzed a bunch of data, probably more than was on this list, and Linda was so helpful in gathering all of it. But at a high level, gathering some student outcomes data, which we'll review, looking at some social emotional learning data from the state, of course, analyzing that family engagement data, as well as operations, facilities, and a bunch of other pieces of information. So we will share all of this in the form of a summary of the needs assessment we conducted to share some of our key findings that informs the creation of the strategic plan. And why this is so critical, once we complete the needs assessment, we go towards our strategic planning framework. And I'll walk through this. I think you saw it last time, but we know that Chelmsford already had a mission and vision, and so was very important for us to incorporate that into the strategic plan and really act as that foundation. And so mission and vision really are just the long-term district aspirations that we will review tonight. And what the steering committee then did based on that needs assessment is crafted our theory of action. And the theory of action is a fundamental belief around what will lead to long-term success in the district. And so when you think about making a decision, districts should be able to go back to their theory of action and have this guide the decision, see everyone's role in that theory of action, their role in the district. And that leads down to the priorities that we developed, which are really the areas of work that are key levers for district success. And this is where we say a short list is better than a long list, so we'll share the 5 tonight. And then what we're still in the process of developing right now are the measurable goals. We have some drafted, some still refining to think about. Once we have the mission and vision, the theory of action, the priorities, how are we actually going to measure that what we've put on paper for is working. And so that is such a critical piece, because we do not want this to be a pretty plan that just lives on a shelf, but really want to see the change in the district. And so once we finalize those measurable goals, the district will move into that implementation phase by identifying what initiatives already exist in the district that support the strategic plan, and what are those action steps, the really nitty-gritty of how each person in the district is aligning their time, their activities, so they see themselves in the strategic plan. And so this really is when everyone gets involved, so that they see how their time, their activities are aligned. And I will say too, this naturally, when districts have really strong strategic plans, it makes resource allocation a lot easier, I would say, because once there's alignment across those priorities, aligning resources like time, people, and money, those initiatives should become very logical. So this is the framework that we use to develop the strategic plan. And as I said, we are in that design phase before moving into implementation. So that brings us to the end of our process. Before I go into a summary of the needs assessment, Jay, is there anything you want to add? And if not, I'll just keep going.
I don't. Let me see if is this a natural place if anyone has any questions?
I do. I just had a thought.
Maybe just a question, Tess?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, actually, I'm sorry. I might actually be moving into the next one, which is the needs assessment. But I know that you had received a great deal of input. We'd requested input from, certainly people involved in the district and families, as well as community members, and that you've been integrating that information. My question is, as we go forward, if there are, other people who may have, ideas or thoughts or whatever thing, as they take a look at the, this strategic plan, areas that we may have missed, how would we go about incorporating some of their thoughts?
Yeah, I would say in terms of this draft of the strategic plan, as I mentioned, tomorrow we'll have 3 community meetings where folks will be able to share their thoughts. I think more broadly, while these priority areas and measurable goals will be set, I think the way to really engage people now is to ask folks, based on their unique role, how do they see their activities, their time being aligned to these priorities? So essentially, what can they do? What do they think the district should do in order to reach those measurable goals and priority areas? So that's, I think, if anything is missed, it's really thinking about how folks can plug in to achieving the district's goals.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
I'm sorry, she said thank you. That was very helpful. Okay, you can continue.
All right. So, and I think, yes, and sorry, I don't even know who asked that. I know it wasn't Jeff or Maria, because I know their voices by now.
That was from Donna.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Donna. Great. So we're going to get into, Donna, actually, great more detail on all of the input that we did collect. And I just want to say, and I think this is really just kudos to how you all operate as a district. We had, I think, the best attendance from our focus groups and interviews that we've ever seen, I think, in all of our partner districts we've worked with, and it's been hundreds across the country. And so just really talks about the careful planning that went into ensuring we got those voices represented. And so we feel very confident in these areas of need that we identified. So we're going to go through 5 areas that we bucketed as we conducted this needs assessment, again, both on the qualitative and quantitative data. So we'll talk about some of our findings from academic achievement, from social emotional supports, human capital, operations and facilities, and family and community engagement. And you all can get a copy of this, so I'm not going to read word for word, because what I'm going to do is actually go through each of them and summarize in a bit more detail. So for the academic achievement findings, how we've organized this is there are some sub findings that we had within each of these categories. Those yellow are things we really want to call out as strengths. And then those orange there are things that we thought there were areas potentially for additional improvement or just an area of focus moving forward. So the first thing really to call out, and I'll share some specific data in a moment, but just overall, Chelmsford performs much stronger than the state, not only across grade levels, but across subgroups of students as well. Something else we found, and we'll look at some data, is just students with IEPs and how they perform compared to students in general education. We'll look at what that data shows in areas of room for improvement. And then we'll talk about middle school. So what we found in middle school is there were some discrepancies in performance between these schools. And so it was very clear that just one school was performing more strongly than the other. And so digging deeper into why that may be happening. And then lastly, academic rigor. I just heard from some parents that they would like to see consistent offerings for high achieving students. And we know there are a lot of programs, besides AP courses, the dual enrollment program, but wanted to play this back as something we heard from parents. So these were the 4 buckets under our academic achievement findings. What I'm going to, for some of these that we found, wanted to just show some specific data. So what you're looking at here is a lot, so let me orient you. You're looking at MCAS scores for both ELA, which is on the left, and math, which is on the right. So on the left, these are ELA scores, grades 3 through 10. You can see along there the bottom. And we're looking at the percentage of students who meet expectations or higher. And this is from spring 2021. And so that blue bar is Chelmsford, the purple bar is Massachusetts. So you can see consistently in every grade in ELA, Chelmsford outperforms the state on the MCAS assessment. In math, a very similar story. 5th grade is the only one that Chelmsford performed a few percentage points below in terms of students meeting expectation, but similarly overall, Chelmsford exceeding the scores of the state. And as I said earlier, this is the same setup, ELA and math, percentage of students proficient. But what's different here is we're looking at subgroups of students. So you can see at the bottom, we looked at all students, then special education students, general education students, ELL students, non-ELL students, low income and non-low income, which are the designations of the state. And what to call out here as well is same thing held true across all of these subgroups in ELA and math. Chelmsford did outperform the state. We did want to dig a little bit deeper into some areas, and one to call out is, and there's a lot on this slide, so let me pause just to orient you here, but we looked at the achievement gap between students who are meeting expectations in the general education setting compared to students with IEPs. And so students in general education, that's the 72% you see there. This is Chelmsford. So 72% of students in general education were meeting expectations in ELA, compared to 21% of students in special education meeting expectations. So that's a 51% achievement gap between the two. And when we looked at the Massachusetts scores, you can see that 56% of students in general education overall are at meet expectations or higher, whereas 17% of students in special education are meeting expectations or above. So this here is a 39% achievement gap. And so what this is saying is that there is a larger discrepancy in proficiency in Chelmsford between students in general education versus students in special education compared to the state. And you can see the same thing holds true in math. And so this just highlights thinking about, okay, what are the services that we are providing our students with IEPs? Are we meeting their needs? Are they truly getting the additional supports that they need so that we can work to close the achievement gap? And we are not saying, oh, let's strive for the achievement gap of the state. Of course, we want no achievement gap, but simply just informational to think about, okay, let's take a closer look at how we're supporting students with IEPs. So this closes out some of the, again, just what we wanted to highlight from the achievement piece of it. The needs assessment is very long, so wanted to, and Jay can certainly follow up with it, but wanted to pull out some of the key points. So I'm going to move into the social emotional supports, and here just overall, we heard from students themselves, from staff, that students really feel a sense of belonging in school, which I think just given everything that has occurred over the past 2.5 years is so critical. And there is so much research that I'm sure you are aware of that shows a student's well-being in school is so tied to relationships with staff, with an adult in the building. And so really heard that, and you'll hear it even more in our staff section, that students felt that sense of belonging in school. We also heard from folks that there have been numerous SEL initiatives that have been invested in, not just when the pandemic started, but before then as well, which just speaks to, I think a lot of districts we've seen are in this reactive space, but overall, as a district, those investments have certainly been seen by many. The one area that we heard from a smaller group is that some of the mental health professionals still felt that their time was really being spent on reactive supports. I think, of course, the nature of their role, they likely are going to be providing those reactive supports, but an area that may require a bit more digging into to understand what is at the root cause of them feeling like they're spending more time on reactive supports. So to support some of this, we're going to share some takeaways from some of our focus groups. So a few takeaways here. One, again, just the incredible investments in personnel and programming have really received praise, and a general education teacher saying second step has been extremely beneficial at the elementary level. Staff additions have had the biggest impact by reducing caseloads and providing targeted supports. And lastly, programming is most appreciated when it's accompanied by supporting infrastructure. And so I'm not going to read all the quotes here, but just again at the bottom right, a psychologist reporting the universal health screener at the middle school level has helped support staff immensely. And so I think just, of course, SEL is a priority in all districts across the country right now, but what really stood out in Chelmsford is that you all have aligned your systems, your structures, your resources to this priority, and it is certainly felt by those in the buildings. And the second thing to call out here is, as we think about the again, that student sense of belonging, we looked at the 2019 was the most recent data that was available, but the school climate survey. And so this is the average school climate index. Again, we looked at Chelmsford versus the state to benchmark. You can see here grades 4, 5, 8, and 10. Chelmsford, again, that blue bar. And so across the board, fourth grade at that same level, but otherwise outperforming the state. And to highlight a couple of the greatest strengths that we saw, I'm going to call out a few. So in grade 4, Really something, and this was evident when we spoke to students, but just Chelmsford students really feeling that students respect one another, which is great. In grade 5, students at my school get along well with each other. So again, just a similar sentiment across all of the grades that students really do respect one another. You can see that really as the theme throughout, which I think, of course, not only speaks to your students, but speaks to the staff in the building who are able to foster that environment that students feel safe, respected, comfortable, which of course is foundational before they can even learn. And so really just some positives to call out on the SEL side. And this really goes nicely into human capital. And so we'll talk about, again, the strength of those staff relationships. We're certainly called out as a strength by families. And then we'll talk about 2 areas that we heard that could use continued focus, one around staff diversity and the other around responsive professional development. So a couple takeaways when we asked families in our survey for them to rate the strengths of the Chelmsford Public Schools, and we had a few different buckets that they could choose from. 76% of families identified teachers and staff as the top district strength. You can see there behind family communication and academic rigor. And just, I think one, hopefully this makes everyone feel good, but a parent specifically calling out on the right there, the teachers and administrators have done a wonderful job the past 2 very difficult years. And so I think recognizing that, yes, despite all of the challenges, the staff are so strong in the buildings that they felt supported over the past couple of years. And shifting more towards thinking about just human capital at large. And, I think this is especially often a challenge in smaller districts, but looking at the student demographics. So you can see on the left here, if we look at student and teacher racial diversity, about 68% of students in Chelmsford identify as white, followed next by around 17% identified as Asian, around 8% identify as Hispanic, and then you can see smaller portions there identifying as African American, other, and multi-race. And so when we compare that to teachers, and I know this is not a surprise, but the majority of teachers in Chelmsford, 95% identify as white. And so here, just some additional feedback from parents saying, I would like to see more representation of students of color in the simple things like coloring pages, handouts, rooms, posters, arts, and workbook activities. And I think appreciating this comment from a parent, I think it is very difficult when the applicant pool is smaller, depending where you're located in the country. And so thinking about what are the other ways we ensure that all of our students, each and every student, sees themselves in the classroom. And then another parent sharing that strengthening the diversity, support, inclusion for all of our students should be another priority for the district. And so not only did we hear this from parents, but from staff and others as well. So this wraps up the human capital portion. I'm going to pass it to Alex, who will go through the next 2 areas.
Great, thanks, Tess. And I'll just voice as we move to operations and facilities that once we've talked about this, these next 2 sections, we will take a break and open it up for questions from the school committee. So I know we're presenting a lot. We will give you a chance to ask any clarifying questions. So turning to operations and facilities, this is one that we heard a lot about throughout our needs assessment process. Heard a lot about the strong finances of the district, that the budget was well managed and had really turned into a district strength. We also heard that the facilities, especially at the middle school level, could be improved, and that some other operational challenges like master school scheduling and other sort of logistical pieces could also be improved in order to help throughout the district. So turning to that first piece of finances, this was something that we heard a lot about. And I think even just looking at the italics at the bottom of these quotes gives you a sense of sort of how pretty much everyone at all levels of the district was reporting this. We heard from people on the school committee, we heard from teachers, we heard from principals, and really just highlighting all the various ways that supports the district, that it feels like it can be really open up opportunities for the school committee to focus on what's important versus the teachers being able to feel like when they need money for a resource, they're never turned away because there isn't money for it. And we also heard a lot about how the infrastructure and the operational investments that Chelmsford had made starting in, I believe, 2019, really set the district up for success moving into the pandemic. That the one-for-one technology initiative really made the virtual learning transition a lot easier than in some other school districts. And we also heard a lot about the shape of the facilities. And despite a lot of sort of modernization efforts throughout the district, we did hear that this was overwhelmingly the #1 area of improvement flagged by families in our family engagement survey. And so you can see there on the left-hand side, this was from the same survey that Tess referenced earlier. We asked about areas of strength and we asked about areas of improvement. And so similar to the areas of strength, we let them select a few of a big list of areas and identified whether or not they saw those as areas of improvement for Chelmsford. And far away, the #1 area of improvement was buildings and facilities, with 57% of those respondents identifying that as an area, leading SEL at 26% and academic rigor at 22%. And I think the quote I really would love to draw your attention to here is the one at the top left, that staff are great at all of my children's schools, but the buildings are a mess and not reflective of the great learning inside. Again, going back to that point that the staff is such a strength of the district and the learning inside the buildings is so great, but that it didn't feel like the buildings were in a similar shape to actually reflect that. And if you want even more affirmation, the one at the bottom right, that there are so many things that that parent is happy with, but the buildings is simply not one of them. And looking at a couple quotes that dig into a bit more detail here from some district and school staff, that the storage is a particularly big issue. And looking at those quotes from the students at the bottom, that the buildings really don't make the students feel excited to be attending school every day. So then we'll also take a look at family and community engagement. And this is one of the areas where we really just saw a lot of affirmation for Chelmsford as well. That first piece, the district communication, the communications coming out of the central office were widely appreciated by pretty much everyone receiving them. We saw great satisfaction scores there. We saw similarly high scores for school communication, saying that it was really often very helpful. The one thing we did hear was that this could be somewhat inconsistent from family to family, that overall a lot of folks had really good experiences, but especially when it came to hearing from teachers, the individual experience of folks throughout Chelmsford could differ and had a really strong impact on their overall satisfaction. So we'll take a look at this. This is going back to that first, the areas of strength question that we asked on this family engagement survey. And you can see on the far left that teachers and staff bucket that Tess shared earlier, up at 76%. The second highest area of strength that we heard about was this family communication piece at 49, just edging out academic rigor. So 49% of people who took the survey selected this as an area of strength for Chelmsford. And I think both of these quotes really speak to that. The communication has always felt on time, honest, and heartfelt on that left-hand quote. And the one on the right, just really feeling like the district and school kept the parent informed as necessary. So seeing that that is really a strength. But like I said, also hearing a bit about some of the inconsistencies there, and I'll direct your attention here to the top two quotes. That one on the left, a parent who said that if the rest of the schools are run as well as my child's school, I will happily watch my children grow and learn in the Chelmsford School District. Just a really glowing affirmation of that communication and just the way that their experience was. And then at the top right, a parent saying that there is no communication to parents from teachers on any kind of monthly basis, just to simply share the projects and topics that were worked on or will be worked on. So very different experiences based on the school site that their child may be at, or even just the teacher that they had. So making sure that that is a possible area to look into of trying to create more of a consistent parent experience throughout the district. So I will, as promised, pause there for questions. Jay, you're in the room. Are there any questions on the needs assessment before we start talking about some of those key components of the plan?
Yep, give me 1 second, Alex, and we'll check.
Absolutely.
Do you guys have any question?
I'm good.
I do have a question.
Donna has a question.
Yes.
So when we're looking at the social emotional supports category, you used a survey from 2019, which is pre-COVID, and we know that since COVID, and based on some of the information that we've looked at this year, that students may not be feeling quite as attached, maybe to their schools or to other students or staff members. And we also, through some of our surveys, identified some groups of students who felt isolated. So is there any plan to update, to use more updated information, as we go forward in terms of, the things that we looked at this past year, taking COVID into account, and then how that will determine where we're going to go from here?
So I see Tess came off mute. I will just very quick piece of context on that data. So the survey that we referenced there, which you may know, but for general awareness, is the Massachusetts Vocal Survey, which is administered alongside the MCAS. And so because the MCAS was not offered in 2020, there was no data from that year. And the 2021 data we were still working with at the time of putting the needs assessment together. We are hopeful that starting in 2022, as this all becomes a bit more consistent, that can continue to be a strong benchmark and that can then be updated. So just wanted to provide that context there. Tess, I'll turn it over to you for whatever you were going to say.
Yeah, no, Donna, I think that's a great point. And, I think the benefit of connecting with so many folks beyond just looking at the quantitative data is we certainly heard that, and of course, just the impact of COVID, as well as, beyond even Chelmsford, just all of the research that has come out nationally. And so you will actually see that reflected in the strategic priority and the measurable goals that, yes, even though, we looked at this data, it was a strength, that doesn't mean it's going to be something you don't focus on moving forward, and instead thinking about what are those clear metrics for how you all can measure student social emotional well-being beyond even the assessment Alex talked about, vocal, since it's not given every year, and of course you want more timely data, which sounds like you've been looking at. So Alex will preview that in a moment, just some of those other metrics that Chelmsford is going to be looking at.
Thank you.
Donna says thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
Do you have anything? Okay, you guys can continue.
All right, thank you, Jay. And thank you, Donna. So moving on, as Tess said, we really used that needs assessment to help inform a lot of the pieces of this strategic planning process. But before we get all the way into that, we did just want to take a brief step back and just sort of walk through the process that we went through with the steering committee that Tess spoke about earlier. So just again, at a glance, I'm sure these are numbers that most people are familiar with, but Chelmsford Public Schools, almost 5,000 students, And using state terminology, about 4% are ELL, about 17% are identified as students with disabilities, and about 20% of students are identified by the state of Massachusetts as economically disadvantaged, and a 99% graduation rate over 5 years. So just to get a very quick sense of the district at large. I will pause here for a minute. I know there's a lot of text on the screen. As Tess said earlier, Chelmsford already had a mission and vision, these long-term aspirations for the community. So I'm going to set a timer. I don't, for 1 minute. I know it's not enough to give you a chance to read everything as part of the mission and vision, but hopefully it will give you a chance to refamiliarize yourself with it if you haven't seen it recently. So I'll set a timer now. All right, and that is my timer. So I know that probably was not enough time to read all of this unless you are an incredibly quick reader, but hopefully enough time to refamiliarize yourself again, since that mission and vision serves as such a grounding point for where we went from here. So again, going back to that framework, the next step was to develop a theory of action. So I will read through this briefly and then break it down a bit to give a little bit of a sense of some of the ideas and the thoughts that went behind how we built this theory of action, or this set of core beliefs for Chelmsford Public School. So we distilled a lot of that down to this if-then statement, that if district leaders provide direction, rigorous curriculum, appropriate resources, and ongoing development, and principals create the conditions and culture and build buy-in to ensure initiatives are implemented faithfully in a welcoming environment, and teachers foster an inclusive learning environment, ensure curriculum is accessible to each and every student, and build strong relationships with students and families, then we will realize our vision that every student will reach their full academic potential, feel confident in themselves and their abilities, and grow into strong community members and citizens. So again, just to provide some context on where these pieces came from, this district leaders piece is meant to show that districts are responsible for resource allocation in Chelmsford Public Schools and really setting the direction of instruction for the rest of the district. Principals then are responsible for ensuring that that vision and that direction is implemented. And they're also responsible for creating a safe environment and a welcoming environment in their school sites. Teachers are really responsible for making sure that that instruction is tailored to each and every student, including students who need it the most. And we also really wanted to highlight that we know that those strong relationships, again, going back to the social emotional learning piece that we saw during the needs assessment, that those strong relationships are really important, and that it ensures a focus on social emotional well-being as we move forward with the strategic plan. Finally, this then statement that this connects back to Chelmsford vision that students need as full citizens of their community. So again, built this theory of action as a summary statement of these core beliefs. And using this theory of action, combined with some pieces from that needs assessment, we were able to identify 5 priority areas for Chelmsford's strategic plan. And you'll see that a lot of these are pulled directly from the needs assessment, but that first being academic achievement, the second being social emotional learning, the third being staff and human capital, the fourth being operations and facilities, and the fifth being equity. So really identifying these as the big areas that we want to call out within the strategic plan. So just to look at what we mean by each of these and some of those first drafts of how we're going to measure progress. Around the first priority of academic achievement, the priority was that the district will focus on mathematical achievement, particularly in elementary and middle grades, so K through 8, to build a strong foundation for academic success in high school and beyond. And we're going to measure progress there by looking at 4 main things. And I want to call out a couple things on this slide, especially because they'll be relevant as we look at the other priorities. For many of these priorities, we are still, as Tess said earlier, very much still working on building out how exactly we want to measure progress for this achievement. Academic achievement is one of the ones where we built it out a little more fully. So that's the first thing. And second, that these are really just in the metric stage. These eventually are going to be made more specific, building these metrics into SMART goals that really allow maximum accountability and specificity so that everyone knows how we're doing compared to the strategic plan. As a really important piece of what Tess talked about earlier, of making sure that the plan doesn't just sit on a shelf somewhere. These help us to make sure that we can actually chart progress against the plan itself and know areas where we really need to spend more attention or commit more initiatives. So looking at the metrics for academic achievement, you see down there at the bottom, percent of students making adequate annual growth based on the SGP, the student growth percentiles from the MCAS, the percent of third graders meeting standards in reading, third graders meeting standards in math, percentage of eighth graders meeting standards in math. And so again, seeing that while the priority itself focuses on mathematical achievement, since that was a really big area that the steering committee wanted to focus on, we still make room for tracking those reading scores within the actual metric themselves, so that we can make sure that even as we focus on math, we are still maintaining that strong reading scaffolding that already exists. The second priority was around social emotional learning, and said that the district will focus on ensuring students have strong relationships with staff and their peers, so students feel welcomed, included, and safe in school. This is one that we are still working on. It's going back to Donna's question around what other areas are we going to be looking at. This is one that we're still working on with the steering committee. The current metrics are around the percent of students that feel a sense of belonging in school across grades K through 12. The second is looking at that vocal survey that is tied to MCAS. And the third, looking at the youth risk behavior survey to make sure that students feel safe in school, and not just that sense of belonging covered in the first bullet. The third priority we'll look at is staff and human capital, that the district will focus on attracting and retaining a high quality teaching staff equipped to meet the diverse needs of our student population. So going back to the diversity piece that Tess talked about from the needs assessment, this is acknowledging that while the diversity of staff doesn't necessarily match the student diversity within Chelmsford Public Schools, we really want to address that within the strategic plan by making sure that even if the staff don't necessarily reflect student populations at this moment, that we are able to make sure that the staff that we have are as well equipped as they can be to meet those diverse needs of students. That being said, this is one that we are going to be working on a lot. So we have the drafting in progress down there for metrics, just because it is still very much a great conversation with the steering committee about figuring out how we really want to represent this priority and then how we want to measure it. So I would say that this is one of the more work in progress ones that we're looking forward to continuing work on. Priority 4, operations and facilities, as we saw from the needs assessment, this was highlighted a ton. The district will enhance educational facilities to provide students with safe and modern facilities that support innovative student learning. And we'll be measuring progress here. The exact metrics are still to be determined, but the first general metric that we'll be looking at is an annual review of a long-range facilities plan to make sure that the district is, that Chelmsford is staying on track with plans to update and modernize facilities for to support student learning. And that second metric aligning somewhat to making sure that with the facilities that we have, that we are expanding innovative spaces so that we can incorporate more types of learning, including technology augmentation to existing classrooms and updating them so that really we're able to make the best of what we have. So building out some metrics around this. And then the fifth priority area is focused on equity. And this is another one that is being worked on, that the district will focus on providing equitable opportunities for each and every student to close achievement gaps between marginalized student populations and their peers. And one metric that we really want to be looking at here is the amount of core instruction across students of similar grade levels. So making sure that students at different schools or even within the same school are receiving the same amount of support and the same amount of that core instruction. And then we are still working on some other metrics to think about how can we hold ourselves accountable to this priority to make sure that each and every student is being supported and welcomed within the school district while being encouraged to achieve as much as they can. So I will hit pause here and I'm going to turn it over to Tess.
Great, thanks, Alex. So before we just pause for any questions, wanted to quickly reground in all of the content that you just saw and how it aligns to the framework. So Alex reviewed the mission and vision, the theory of action and the rationale for how that was created, and then reviewed the priorities and the starts of those drafted measurable goals. And so again, all of these components will be finalized just in the upcoming weeks before the district moves into implementation. And we are going to pause for questions, but I'm going to proactively think that maybe one of your questions is where do we go from here? So let me preview those and then open it up to you all. So as we said, and anyone else who's on the line, we have 3 community engagement meetings tomorrow, 2 virtual, 9 a.m. and 3 p.m., and then 1 in person at 6 p.m. at McCarthy Middle School. And I know you all have already been marketing those well. Once we get their feedback via mechanisms through those meetings, we'll incorporate that into the draft strategic plan based on discussion and a survey they will complete. And then we have a meeting with the steering committee next Wednesday to review that and really finalize the draft of the strategic plan so that Chelmsford can publish that and then start planning for successful implementation. So those are the next steps, but let's get back to Q&A, and I'll pull down my screen, and Jay, you let us know if there are any questions.
Dennis, yes.
Here's a question from Dennis.
Yeah, just on the academic achievement, why the particular focus, first of all, the focus on just mathematics at K-8, and under the measures, why specifically 3rd grade as a way of measuring?
Yep, that's a great question. So based on the needs assessment, which we shared, which seems like a long time ago in this presentation now, it was identified that math achievement is lower in Chelmsford compared to reading achievement. And so the steering committee chose to focus on math. We often find if priorities are too broad, again, it's the idea that, you have to say yes to really good things and no to other really good things. And so that is why math was chosen based on the needs assessment, focused on K-8, as those are kind of the foundational years before high school that will set students up. The one thing I want to clarify, though, and to your point, just because it's not, it doesn't mean that reading is no longer important. Of course it is. It's just stating and putting a stake in the ground that we've identified an area of need for math, and that's where we'll focus. The question about 3rd grade that you had, so typically just with student achievement, of course, again, in the effort to be really specific about what we're going to look at, 3rd grades is always a critical year at the elementary level, especially you saw reading in there because of how critical, the questions are of how well students are reading in third grade, in success of all subjects. So that was reading in there. And then for math, not only focusing on third grade math, but then 8th grade to wrap up that middle school as well. So again, this does not mean reading is not important. It doesn't mean, of course, that you all won't be looking at other grades of data, but these are the specific ones that progress will be measured against the strategic plan.
Thank you.
Dennis says thank you.
Jeff or John? No. I do have one question regarding tomorrow's public input sessions. I know the information has gone up, but we can never say it enough. If people want to join virtually tomorrow, how would they go about doing that?
Sure, so, do you want me to answer this, Tess?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have put out, like in the newsletters and on the website and even Facebook, notices for the different meetings. And for the 2 virtual ones, there's a link.
Okay.
That you can just click and you can receive an invitation for the morning session, which is at 9, or the afternoon session, which is at 3.
Okay.
So there's a link that says, I want to join the morning, or I want to join the afternoon, or if you really want to come to both, you can come to both.
Okay.
You just click the link and then you'll receive like an Evite
Okay.
with a link to the meeting.
All right, so that's how people should,
And
if they're
then-
listening tonight and decide, well, I
Yep,
really
if
want
they
to jump
wanted to,
in.
it's right on the website.
All right,
And then, tomorrow night at McCarthy Middle School at 6 is an in-person session.
In a
So-
library.
In a library, and we'll do this live tomorrow night.
Great, thank you.
I don't think we have any more questions, Tess.
Great. Well, it was great to see you all. Thank you so much for having us for a full hour. We really appreciate it. And we're looking forward to finalizing the plan, showing you the pretty version. And in the meantime, I hope you all have restful summers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alex, as well.
Thank you.
Oops. She's done with us. Yeah, I know she said, went a little bit longer than we were probably anticipating, but honestly, there's been so much time and work that's gone into this for them, even to take an hour, I think is fine to kind of educate the community. We certainly would love people to come tomorrow. We know also sometimes people can't. So if they're watching tonight, and this is also a recorded session, they could go back and watch something if they wanted to. Tomorrow will be a slightly abridged version. It won't have quite as much data on some of the backing of the different goals, but we'll go through this data with whoever comes tomorrow.
Okay, great.
Great. Where was I? So that was number 3. And I will just say that the technology works pretty good. And I had two different computers going at the same time, so that's more good news.
Professional growth.
For this meeting. 4th, we have a recognition of LGBTQ Pride Month, and this is something that we as a district actually started, formalized a few years back. The Select Board had created a proclamation to kind of recognize June as LGBTQ month. And we have done the same and then shared that information with the schools. So we have an updated proclamation that's before you today that we could read and vote and accept.
So why don't we have John read the proclamation, and then we can vote.
Chelmsford, I'm going to start over.
That's okay.
I'm not starting on an error, sorry. Chelmsford Public Schools Proclamation, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer plus, LGBTQ plus, Pride Month, June 2022. Whereas the Chelmsford Public Schools is a welcoming learning community, and whereas the Chelmsford Public Schools recognizes the importance of equality and freedom, and whereas the nation was founded upon and is guided by a set of principles that includes that every person has been created equal, that each has rights to their life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and that each shall be accorded the full recognition and protection of the law. And whereas the Chelmsford Public Schools lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, plus community are a vital part of all fields and professions and contribute to a stronger community. And whereas the Chelmsford Public Schools is dedicated to fostering acceptance of all of its members and preventing discrimination and bullying based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And whereas the Chelmsford Public Schools is strengthened by and thrives upon the rich diversity of ethnic, cultural, racial, gender, and sexual identities of its residents, all of which contribute to the vibrant character of our system. And whereas the Centers for Disease Control recognizes that LGBTQ+ teens are at a higher risk to be victims of violence and have increased suicide rates. And whereas it is imperative that young people in the district, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity, feel valued, safe, empowered, and supported by their peers, educators, and school leaders. Now, therefore, we, the Chelmsford School Committee, on behalf of the Chelmsford Public Schools, hereby proclaim and recognize that June 2022 as Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Queer Plus Pride Month in the Chelmsford Public Schools, and urge all members to recognize the contributions made by the members of the LGBTQ+ community and to actively promote the principles of equality and liberty. Signed this 7th day of June, 2022.
Thank you. So Jeff, I'll take a motion to adopt this.
I move that the school committee vote to support and proclaim and recognize June 2022 as Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Queer Plus Pride Month in the Chelmsford Public Schools.
Second.
Great. Any discussion?
I just want to say that I fully support this. I think this is a great proclamation, just like the last one.
Did an excellent job reading it as well. All those in favor?
Aye.
4-0. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is Joanna had prepared a warrant signing schedule, kind of getting back into warrant signing mode. I know John's very excited about this. So you do have that before you today. Did you want to just touch on that? Or is it pretty self-explanatory?
Just thank you for coming in every other week to review the accounts payable warrants. And this is just setting out the calendar for next fiscal year, basically coming in typically 2 times a month to review the details.
Just, Donna, just a question. I mean, I know before, pre-COVID, we were going to work on some sort of thing to put in the school committee handbook about the warrant. Do we want to try to get back to that? I know Joanne and I both were kind of hemming and hawing on a few things, and then everything went.
In terms of, yes,
Okay.
yes. So something to just address the whole process of warrant
Right,
signing.
okay.
And
So I'll see if I can dig up what I had, and then Joanne.
Right, yeah,
Joanne
that was
had some stuff
pre-COVID.
too.
Yeah, it was just something we were going to update in that particular.
Yeah,
handbook.
right, and
Actually, it
then-
might be not a bad idea, Dennis, to put that on our school committee handbook. Actually, I'll put you in charge of that.
Thanks, Donna.
You're welcome. Just to take a look and see if there's anything else that needs to be updated in there. See how I delegated that?
I did see that. Do you want to do that maybe like at a summer meeting, or do you want to do
I'm
it?
thinking,
for the next meeting?
I'd like to do it maybe in August, please.
Okay.
Yeah, right before we come back.
Yep.
I'll add it to the list for tracking. Great. So there's no real motion necessary on that.
No.
You just have the schedule. Next 2 items are actually combined together on the same memo. So we have one additional list of some one-time funding considerations for you to kind of close out fiscal '22. And then Joanna has prepared the accompanying budget transfers for those items. So if you look at the list, it was the last page, it was the recommendation list. The big number that jumps out, we had purchased the new stadium lighting about 2 meetings ago, the Musco lights for the stadium. And then we had to go out to bid, but the town helped us with the bidding process for the company that will actually come and do the installation and the footings and the electrical wiring and whatnot. And that bid came in at $135,380. So we actually have a contract here this evening as well that's been prepared by Andy, your counsel, for this particular bid. It's going to Utility Services and Assistance in Hooksett, New Hampshire. They were a group that's actually done work in Chelmsford before. They did some work on the existing stadium lights, and they are a company that's done Musco installs as well, so they're very familiar with the product. That's the big number that's on the list. I am actually happy to say at this point, we're still on target as far as our delivery, because there have been supply chain issues on a lot of stuff. But our lighting products, the poles and lights, are set to come the end of the first week in July, the end of the week of July 4th. And then we're trying to get this project done in the month of July. We have an August 12th end date on it, because we want to try to get everything geared up for fall sports season. So we're still on track for that, which is great. And then the other items on this particular list, I can go over them real quickly with you. We had a couple of door items at a couple of the different schools, new front entrance doors at Byam. So we're trying to upgrade a couple of office layouts here at central office. We have one in the personnel office. We actually started doing a renovation to the front foyer where you walk in on the floors. So that would be to continue that through the hallways. It's a good summer project to have done. At the high school, there was a request to have some new window and a frame and some windows in the art wing added to the building. The existing window and frames are damaged and in need of repair. The high school has been trying to do some upgrades to that Career and College Readiness Center. We were able to purchase about half of the furnishings for that over the course of this year, and it really looks good. We had a couple of presentations in there. We've received some very good feedback on that. So this would be to finalize those particular purchases and have the stuff in for the fall. John Morris, our science coordinator, was looking for a couple of different science items. One of them was for some new stools in the physics classroom at the high school. We have an item for, again, new rear entrance doors near the gymnasium, near the PAC at the high school. We're trying to upgrade periodically throughout the district some of the furnishings in different teacher rooms. So we have the high school project on here for this summer. Another John Morris request for some science tables in schools, in a particular 7th grade science classroom at McCarthy. New front entrance doors at Westland School for our CHIPS and ComEd program. And then also the side door for the CHIPS entrance, it's a standalone entrance, and the loading dock receiving doors at over at Westland Schools. So these one-time purchases add up to $265,000. Again, Joanna has outlined in the budget where that funding would be recommended to come from, as well as a number of items as a kind of a second motion here as we're managing our year-end funding. Moving some expenses back to the local budget to free up some space within the revolving funds, which we've done over the last couple of years. That's a second set of transfers that's with you. I think you recall one of the things that we've tried to do over the last couple of years to help out the turf field revolving fund is to take that bond principal and interest payment and bring that onto the local budget, which then opens up a little bit of money on the revolving fund. Very similar items with transportation, bless you, athletics, and then even like our 101 initiative. If we pull that money back into the local budget, it leaves more flexible money in the revolving fund for that particular expenditure. It just gives us a little bit more flexibility when we get into fiscal '23. So you have the one-time purchases, and then you have that in front of you. And I think that would be the final purchases and budget transfers for this year. We then close June, and at our July meeting, we'll have to kind of see the timing on when the town closes and whatnot. You would likely have one final set of budget transfers to close out the year.
Did we already do something in terms of prepaying out-of-district tuition?
No, we haven't yet. We've talked about it, and that'll
Yeah.
be part of the strategy, and also potentially funding that new, the special ed reserve fund that we set up at town
Okay.
meeting. That'll be like the final transfer.
Okay.
As we kind of get down to the penny of how much money we have left. That'll be in the July
Okay.
time, so you'd make those final motions. And that's basically to zero out the budget. Yep.
All right, so we're looking for two motions. The first is to approve local operating budget transfers.
I move that the school committee approve these FY 2022 local operating budget transfers totaling $942,294 from 16 favorable DESI categories to the 6 DESI categories noted above.
Second.
Okay. Any other question or discussion?
Just on the transportation one, so it's the transportation local budget line, and then there's a transportation revolving? Okay,
Yes, you're
Right.
exactly right.
Okay.
So,
just because it goes transportation to transportation, I suppose, yeah.
yeah, I kind of added on my little chart on the left, a little description of what it is. So like the one-to-one leases, transportation, coaching stipends,
Yeah.
that's what that was meant to do.
Yeah.
And then off to the right is the name of the DESI category where those expenses would be funded from on the local budget.
So the ones on the left are the
That's the description. So
Right.
like, let's take the first one.
Yeah.
Let's take transportation. So right now, a portion of our 1.8 million in regular bus is funded from the transportation revolving fund. This is saying, and 240,000 has already been debited to the transportation revolving fund, cash out the door. What this is saying is, let's have a budget transfer first of 240,000 from a favorable category in our local budget to the transportation DESI function code. So that's step one. And then once you approve that for these 6 areas, then we'll do a journal entry that will move the expenses. So it will credit the transportation revolving fund and then debit the local operating budget. So in effect, all, or might have a little bit of June, but the majority of the transportation revolving fund, or transportation expenses for this school year will all be on the local budget rather than a portion being on the revolving fund. No, it's a good question. We do this once a year if there is, funding available, and it's a way to have it kind of be one time and not an embedded thing in our operating budget.
At the end, when all is said and done, we're moving the expense from the revolving fund to the local budget.
Okay.
So which is then going to have extra flexibility in the revolving fund.
Right.
It's a 2-step process.
All right, does anybody have any other questions? All right, this will be a roll call vote. Jeff?
Aye.
Dennis?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0.
Thank you. And then on the top of the first page was the other one.
And so I'll take a motion for the $265,435.
I move that the school committee vote to approve the FY 2022 local operating budget. I already did that.
No.
Oh, no, here I go, yeah. The local budget transfers totaling $265,435 for Chelmsford Public Schools as presented. The budget transfer is shifting from one DESI category that is favorable to 4 other DESI categories where the items should be purchased.
Second.
All right, does anybody have any questions on that? Any further discussion?
Just want to say John Morris is really taking advantage. I like it. Science guy. There should be more coordinators on there, but other than that, no comment.
I don't have a question on this, but I have a question after we vote, so.
Okay, so this is also a roll call vote. All right, Jeff?
Aye.
Dennis?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0.
The question was just, I see we're doing the entrance doors at a couple of schools. I know we talked about like vestibules and things like that. And again, this was all pre-COVID as well. Anything?
Right, so, we are going to do a separate look.
Okay.
So these are doors that, have just been identified over time as just having like different little sticking problems and they don't close securely. So these were identified to be replaced. This is just a one-for-one replacement of doors. Similar to what we did at the high school with the self-contained vestibule, when we had done our security audit pre-COVID, there were a number of different items that we were already working on. One was, say, the security cameras, things like that. We will take a look this summer to kind of go back, do another walk through the building, see if there are any different items to be addressed. The entryways at a couple of the other schools, have been discussed. They're just not as clean cut as the particular high school project. I did have a conversation with Christine Clancy, who's the new DPW director, and between her and Brian, our facilities guy, and maybe even the town, I'm losing his title, but the person who would do the code type stuff, because we need to get them involved for any kind of construction project we were doing. We're going to take a walk through with that kind of a lens and potentially come back with recommendations. I think timing would be an issue, obviously. It's important to us, during the downtime, during the summer, to be able to go through the buildings and see what we can do. But we will report back out on that.
Great, thank you.
I had that on my list as well. And I think that if in the short term, right, the long term would be the vestibules. In the short term, just making sure that our procedures, protocols and procedures are in place so that it's consistent.
Right. And we'll want to do, I mean, we usually do that over the course of the summer anyway, like a refresher for everyone, but just make sure we're on top of our game for the start of the school year.
Thank you.
There'd just be, if I can for a second, there would just be one more recommendation I would make. So, and I didn't write it on the list, that was my error. So you did approve the funding for the contract with the company who's going to do the install. So the select board did, not the select board, the town did help us with this bid. So the select board also voted to approve of this contract. But as a formality, because it is the school committee who's going to be doing this contract, I'd recommend you vote to approve the contract to this vendor. And then Andy's prepared it for the school committee to sign off on. So I can send that around for signatures after. You would be signing it, so I think it makes sense to have you vote to sign it before you sign it.
For the lights.
Yeah, this is the company that's going to do the install of the lights. So this is that 135,000. So it would just be a recommendation to approve the contract to Utility Service and Assistance, Inc. in the amount of the 135,000. I can give you the exact number. And then we'll send these around for signatures afterward.
135,380.
135,380.
And it's utility management
Service and Assistance, Inc.
and assistance.
Yeah, Utility Service and Assistance Incorporated.
So it'd be to approve the contract up from them for this amount.
I move that we approve the contract for utilities, services, and assistance, Inc. for the installation of the lights at Simonian Stadium.
In the amount of 135.
In the amount of $135,380.
Second.
Perfect.
Thank you. This will also be a roll call vote. Jeff?
Aye.
Dennis?
Aye.
John? Aye. Donna? 4-0.
Great, thank you very much. And last item for me this evening, Kurt actually referenced it earlier, just an approval of a field trip. This is the 8th grade students from McCarthy Middle School on June 15th, their Canopy Lake Park trip. Again, it's not overnight, it's just a one-day trip, but it happens to be in Salem, New Hampshire, so it's out of state. So we'd recommend approval of that field trip.
Take a motion.
I move that the school committee approve the McCarthy Middle School 8th grade student field trip on June 15th, 2022 to Canopy Lake Park in Salem, New Hampshire.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
4-0.
That's all I have.
All right, thank you very much. All
Thank you.
right, does anybody have any liaison reports? All right.
With the high school PTO, first, the PTO members and the members of the after-prom committee just want to thank all the volunteers who, at the last minute, it was really within 6 weeks that these people put together a fantastic after-prom. It was one of the most, best attended, everyone had a wonderful time, and the number of volunteers who came forward in such a short period of time was really impressive. And the PTO wanted to mention that. They also voted last night for the officers for the PTO for the 2022-2023. The board will be Michelle Mazzelli, treasurer, Leah Pitch, secretary, Amy Dummo, vice president, Kristen Foucher, and Teresa Evan, co-presidents, and Terry Quatamash, social media.
Thank you.
And the Alumni Association will be sending out the scholarship checks in the near future. And anyone who would like to volunteer the July 3rd, helping Mr. Simonian set up the booth for the Alumni Association in the Town Center, just contact Terry McSheehy.
Anybody else?
I have a couple.
Go ahead.
Center School had their last PTO meeting, I think the day after our meeting last time. They voted in a new board as well. The good thing is they had enough people, they have co-positions for almost everything, co-presidents, co-vice presidents, so all the different officers, so that's great, means that a lot of people are involved. They just want to express some gratitude for the one-time expenditures that we approved for them, including the cafeteria tables and new art furniture. And they have lots of end-of-the-year events coming up in the next couple weeks. And then last night, the CHIPS board met. They also elected a new board. They're going to try to go back to, this year they did all virtual meetings, so they're going to try to return to in-person meetings next year, either on Mondays or Thursdays, the first Monday or Thursday of the month. They're still going to have to figure that out. They've had a couple of events recently, including a photo booth, Spirit Week, staff appreciation breakfast and lunches, and again, thanks to the committee and superintendent for providing some funds for those. In their upcoming events, they have a Touches Truck on Friday, which I guess is a big hit, and they're planning on an August play date before the school year starts next year. The only other things I wanted to mention is just appreciation and for the superintendent for the public input sessions on the middle school. Those were well attended, both virtually and in person. I get to sit on one of the virtual ones. Eventually, you did let other people talk, which is great. And also the great retirement party for the teachers and other staff members that were retiring was over at Princeton last week. So.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up the retirement party. I was going to touch on that because it really was a very, very nice event. You know, I'd like to thank the staff here, as well as Shelley Bethel and other members of the union executive board that put together. It was really a well-attended, very, very nice event, and you know, I hope that people enjoyed themselves. But it was great to see our retiring staff members who devoted so much time to this district recognized for all of their efforts. So.
Just on that note, I mean, there was a lot of work that went into it because this was actually all the retirees this year, but we invited everyone back from the past 2 years because we hadn't been able to have a party for 2 years. So it was quite an undertaking. Our HR office and even Robin in my office put a lot of time into it. Shelley and Katie Lanuette from the Union Executive Committee and even Lauren and the whole group. It's a joint sponsored event, but I did think it went over very well. People were very appreciative.
Yep. Okay, John, did you have any? All right, so the BIAM BSA, their final meeting will be tomorrow night. It will both be in person and virtual if people are interested in attending. All right, this brings us to now to any new or action items. Does anybody have anything that they would like to see discussed at future meetings, excuse me?
Yeah, well, since I just complimented you on the middle school thing, we're going to get an update on what the plan is for next year in terms of.
Yes, I'm going to have an update for you at the next meeting.
Okay, I just want to see if we're going to have something before summer.
Yep, we're going to try to get a report in so we can talk about it publicly before the summertime.
Okay.
All right, and then, so also on our next agenda, we'll begin the superintendent evaluation process, as well as we'll have an update on where we're at with the tennis court committee. Also, I was wondering, I know that there's a new set of DESE COVID guidelines for next year. I know we usually do our COVID update. I didn't know if we wanted to go over those as well.
I'll try to see whatever I can get, like
Okay.
whatever's been like finalized by that point.
All right.
I am curious to see what's going to happen over the course of the summer, just
Right.
because things have changed so much. But
Right.
I can, when I'm doing the update, because that'll be the final one, we're actually doing our last round of pool testing this week. I can give you an update with at least what we know now.
Right,
So I can try to incorporate that. Yeah.
all right. And, I'm sorry,
When you were talking about the tennis committee, were you talking about this tennis court?
McCarthy tennis court.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
I definitely want to talk about that after.
The McCarthy one.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other thing too, I didn't know if we could cover, maybe not in the next meeting, but in some, just get an update on our, the work with IDEA.
Ideas, yep. Yeah, that's just coming to an end for now, for this school year.
Yep.
And we're waiting on the proposal for them. I don't think we have the proposal for next year
Next year,
yet.
okay, great.
But we will
That's-
start talking about that.
All right, terrific. All right, we have nobody here for public input. Do we have any emails that would need to be read into the minutes? Okay. Is there anything else? All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
I second.
All those, okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.